In this video, I want to provide a quick introduction into network performance and network simulation in terms of bad networks. In this video, we're going to be talking about some tools that we can use to simulate and test our FileMaker solution under what user conditions we'll see. So basically under combat conditions, not under the ideal laboratory conditions, which everything is perfect. We need to test FileMaker under actual real conditions that you're going to see out in the wild. So in this video, we're going to be talking about that. We're going to talk about terminology. And then in the next video, we're actually going to install the simulation software and run it. So for example, if you are on a wireless connection, or maybe you are at a location that's very distant from the actual FileMaker server, well, this video is for you. Now, it's important to say that if you're past the beginning stage of being a FileMaker developer, and you've been doing this for a period of time, one of the biggest issues you're going to run into as you build out solutions and you start to deploy and use them is making sure that you build your custom FileMaker application to be performant, which means that it's going to be quick, nimble. People are not going to wait around waiting for it to do the work it does. And so a good benchmark of this is understanding the interaction that people have with a browser. If they're on Google or on Amazon, how long does it take for the screens to redraw and to display their information? Well, that's kind of the modern benchmark for what people expect. It's not necessarily an exact number, and I think it varies from area to area and frankly, geographical location and even country to another location. But people have this expectation that since they're in Google or they're in Amazon and they're shopping or doing whatever they do, that everything will work at that same speed. So if it's slower than that, then they perceive that your application is slow. Now, as a FileMaker developer, the first thing you're going to learn is how to make basic applications. And then as you start to build applications and deploy them, you're going to refine them. And that refining largely can be driven by feature requests, but also be driven by customers complaining that what you've already built is too slow. Now, specifically, this video is really a Apple-based video, simply because the tool we're using is provided explicitly by Apple that helps simulate this bad network condition. So I'm sure that there is an equivalent Windows tool out there. And if you have experience and know what this tool is called, feel free to drop us a line so we can incorporate it into a future version of this video. So what we're talking about is the Network Link Conditioner tool by Apple. And Apple makes this available to their developers free of charge. Now, it looks like there's a version of this tool that also works on iOS. I haven't played with that one yet, but it looks like it does the same thing. It's very simple. What this program does is actually becomes a control panel on your Mac or on your iOS device, and you can go into that control panel and dial down the quality of the network. So this file actually will interfere with the incoming and outgoing network on your specific computer, thereby allowing you to test your FileMaker development under different situations. Now, why is this important? Well, obviously, if you have a FileMaker file that's running locally on your computer, it's going to be as fast as you can ever make it. But that's not really conducive to sharing it with other people, so you're going to load it on a FileMaker server. Now, the fastest possible performance you can get from a FileMaker server is for your users or your clients to be in the same physical office as the FileMaker server. So they're effectively on the same local area network. That's that LAN word that we see batted around over the last 20 years. Now, it's important to note that there is a little bit of terminology here. And the terminology used by networking technical people is the word latency. Latency is the delay from the time that you send a request and you get the data back or the packet back of data. It's normally measured in milliseconds. So, of course, a low number is very fast, right? And a high number is going to be a slower situation, right? Because as FileMaker communicates from the from a client, Pro, Go, or even WebDirect to the server, there's this delay as it goes back and forth. Obviously, if the server is in your office, the delay would be very short. If the server is in the same town, in the same city, then it will be a little bit slower, but probably still good enough. But it puts more of a strain on your application to make sure you build it correctly. Now, if your server is in a different state or different country or across the globe, then the latency is going to go up. Now, let's give you some baseline latency numbers so you know what we're talking about. So if your FileMaker users are in the same office as their server, you're going to see latency numbers typically about 0.5 milliseconds. So like a half a millisecond. And that's pretty normal. If you have a giant 8-story building, or you're at the Apple corporate office there where you have a giant office and maybe you're on different floors and different parts of the network, you might have a little bit higher latency because it has to actually go between routers from different floors, things like that. But really, as fast as you're ever going to see is 0.4, 0.5, 0.6 milliseconds. Now, if we take the server out of the office and move it across town, for example, in the San Francisco Bay Area, you'll see latency in the high single digits. So 7 milliseconds, 8 milliseconds, 9 milliseconds, 10 or 11 milliseconds, right? So things in that range. Now, if you go from one city to the next city and say it's a 30-minute driving time, typically you're going to see the numbers start to creep up. 20 milliseconds, 30 milliseconds. So for example, if we are pinging between the San Francisco Bay Area and the Amazon data center that's in Oregon, which is where, if you're using FileMaker Cloud, that's where that data will be, you're looking at potentially 25 or 35 milliseconds, something like that. If things are going very slow, it might be 45 or 55 milliseconds. That is hopping from the middle of California up to Oregon. If you go across the country, typical milliseconds that you're going to see from the East Coast to West Coast ideally would be 70 milliseconds. Typically, it won't be much faster than that. I don't really see numbers much faster than 70. And then, of course, as things go badly or the network gets really busy, it might slow down to 80, 90, or 120 milliseconds. My general experience is that when we build FM Starting Point designed to be highly optimized, users won't complain until you get above 80, 90, 100 milliseconds. Somewhere at the 100 millisecond level or higher, they actually notice a slowdown. Now, Starting Point is light and highly optimized for performance. So that gives you an ideal baseline of what you can be shooting for in your own custom application. And of course, that's why when we do the training and we talk about scalability and performance, well, we kind of know what we're talking about. We have the relevant combat experience, and we've applied that experience into the latest versions of Starting Point.